Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone would take a seat, then we can start our workshop. Because we're live streaming this event, and I prefer to also start with the substance. So if you could all please have a sit, take your seats so we can start. Translation is available in Spanish, German, French, and English, so feel free to take a device. Ouvrir, ok. I think we have a video that we can start.
Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's here and now, impacting the lives and livelihoods of all Europeans. Our changing climate is causing more extreme weather events in Europe. Record floods, devastating forest fires, prolonged and increasingly intense heat waves and droughts have become disturbingly common. Science predicts that these events are set to become more regular and dramatic in the years to come. Extreme weather events come at a very high cost, both in terms of human lives and economic losses. These costs exacerbate existing regional and social inequalities, hitting lower-income communities the hardest. To address this crisis, we must take two essential steps. First, we must continue our efforts to tackle the root cause of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This is crucial for the long-term health of our planet. Second, we must develop a new set of adaptation policies with a just transition at their core. Vulnerable citizens should not bear the brunt of climate change impacts. They are the least responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, yet they suffer the most. To ensure that vulnerable citizens do not pay twice, we as Socialists and Democrats advocate for a new approach to adaptation, making our infrastructures and our communities much more resilient and rethinking our very notion of social protection to transit towards a new form of social ecological protection. To this effect, the EU must develop a new policy framework for adaptation policy that will be powerful enough to live up to the increasingly disruptive impacts of climate change.
I'm going to stand because it's live streamed. Welcome all to the workshop on adaptation presented to you by the S&D Group. I'm Mohammed Shaheem, Vice President of the S&D Group. I would say mainly responsible for the European Green Deal. And before we start with a very interesting panel, I would want to welcome Irache, our President in the European Parliament of the S&D Group, my Jefa, to come to give us some opening words on adaptation. Irache, please.
Thank you, Mohammed, my dear Vice President. Muchas gracias, amigos y amigas, por vuestra presencia. I will speak in Spanish. Maybe some of you will need the translation. But as you can understand, we are in Malaga, and it's a good opportunity for us to speak in my own language. Muchas gracias, amigos y amigas, por vuestra presencia. Hemos llegado a un momento de la historia que debemos orientar nuestros actos atendiendo a sus consecuencias para el medio. Por ignorancia o indiferencia podemos causar daños inmensos o irreparables al planeta del que depende nuestra vida y nuestro bienestar. Las palabras que acabo de pronunciar no son mías. Estas palabras están recogidas en la Cumbre de la Tierra de Estocolmo, la primera toma de conciencia sobre una amenaza que hoy se ha convertido en existencial y que, como demuestran día a día, las desastrosas consecuencias del cambio climático. Creo que el vídeo ha sido muy claro en ese sentido. Medio siglo después de esta Cumbre de la Tierra de Estocolmo, la vigencia de estas palabras debería no solo estremecernos, sino obligarnos a actuar. La Declaración de Estocolmo hablaba de ignorancia o indiferencia. ¿Cómo se puede ser indiferente ante el grito de desesperación de pueblos enteros del Pacífico, como el que ahora se escucha en Acapulco? ¿Cómo ser indiferente ante la combinación de temperaturas extremas, largas sequías, devastadores incendios y lluvias torrenciales en las dos orillas del Mediterráneo? ¿Cómo ser indiferente ante los millones de personas desplazadas en Asia y África que huyen del infierno climático? El pasado mes de julio fue el mes más cálido jamás registrado en la Tierra, con una temperatura media global de 1,5 grados por encima de los niveles preindustriales, el límite fijado en el Acuerdo de París para finales de siglo. Celebramos nuestro Congreso de los Socialistas Europeos aquí en Málaga, en el Mediterráneo español, y el Mediterráneo es la zona del planeta que ha experimentado una de las mayores subidas de temperatura media, la que convierte en una de las zonas más afectadas por la falta de acción para reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero. Solo en España, el verano pasado tuvimos varias olas de calor con temperaturas extraordinarias y casi 9 millones de personas sufrieron algún tipo de restricciones de agua en 3 meses de sequía. Además, la degradación de las lagunas de Doñana o la lenta agonía de los glaciares del Pirineo son 2 episodios que retratan esta situación, una situación extrema. Pero mientras que la ciencia alerta cada día de la creciente amenaza que el cambio climático causado por el hombre supone para la vida de las generaciones presentes y futuras, el Partido Popular y Vox niegan la realidad para combatir sus efectos. Desde los ayuntamientos y las comunidades autónomas donde gobiernan, difunden bulos medioambientales, retrasan la implantación de zonas de bajas emisiones, eliminan carriles bici y rechazan las políticas de la Unión Europea, ignorando que el precio de no actuar para frenar el calentamiento global es ya superior al coste de combatirlo. Un coste, el generado por los eventos extremos ligados al clima, que la Agencia Europea del Medio Ambiente estima en 650.000 millones desde 1980 y que impacta directamente en sectores económicos estratégicos como el turismo, la agricultura, las infraestructuras, el patrimonio cultural, aunque aún es más doloroso en el coste de vidas. En el verano de 2022 murieron casi 62.000 personas en Europa por las altas temperaturas Y cada año más de 300.000 europeos mueren de forma prematura por la contaminación del aire. Ante este drama, la Unión Europea no puede permanecer indiferente y los socialdemócratas no permanecemos indiferentes, porque la indiferencia en ningún caso nos hace inmunes ante la devastación causada por el cambio climático. Nos lo exigen nuestras sociedades, pero también se trata de una cuestión de justicia histórica. Si fue Europa quien lideró la revolución industrial y la era de los combustibles fósiles, debe ser Europa quien lidere la descarbonización y el nuevo tiempo de las energías sostenibles. Por esta razón, desde la familia socialdemócrata exigimos a la Comisión von der Leyen en 2019 la puesta en pie del Pacto Verde y la Ley del Clima. Querida ministra, querida Teresa, tienes a tu lado al Grupo Socialdemócrata para concluir la reforma del mercado eléctrico y reducir los precios de la electricidad. Y además tenemos hoy que celebrar un día de enhorabuena porque ayer cerraron los trílogos de la ley de restauración, que también ha sido una bandera para nuestra familia política y donde hemos demostrado que las cosas se pueden hacer mucho mejor. Y ha sido gracias al trabajo de este grupo, de nuestro rapporteur César, que no sé si ha llegado porque le teníamos anoche negociando y no le iba a dar tiempo, gracias a la presidencia española liderado por Teresa y también gracias al trabajo que ha acompañado la Comisión Europea y nuestro querido vicepresidente Maroš Šefčovič para conseguir ese gran resultado. Y también estamos a tu lado para agilizar la legislación del paquete Fit for 55. Hablamos de la ley de restauración y también tenemos que hablar de la ley de calidad del aire, que también tuvisteis un acuerdo en la Coreper. Y estas dos cuestiones son muy significativas y muy simbólicas, además, estas dos directivas, porque mientras hay gobiernos conservadores que están aceptando, que están negociando y que están trabajando por conseguir estos acuerdos, tenemos un grupo popular en el Parlamento Europeo torpedeando, llenando de bulos y realmente atacando lo que es el corazón de este Green Deal que hemos impulsado. En plena disputa electoral con la extrema derecha, porque esto también tiene mucho que ver de sus propias disputas electorales entre la extrema derecha y el Partido Popular, pretenden ganar votos con una falsa defensa de los agricultores y de las comunidades rurales y no han dudado en recurrir a una estrategia de mentiras para eludir las certezas científicas y posicionarse en el negacionismo. Y pese al apoyo de más de 3.500 científicos y de grandes empresas, el Partido Popular declaró la guerra, como digo, a la Ley de Restauración de la Naturaleza, una ley indispensable para reparar el 80% de los hábitats degradados, una ley imprescindible para garantizar la seguridad alimentaria, una ley necesaria para consolidar el crecimiento de las empresas, una ley urgente para detener el impacto cada vez más extremo del cambio climático. En definitiva, una ley para mantener un planeta habitable para las generaciones de hoy y de mañana. Y en política estamos para esto, para trabajar y sobre todo para garantizar no solo el presente, sino para garantizar el futuro de las futuras generaciones, de nuestros hijos y nuestras hijas que necesitan un planeta habitable en el que poder vivir. Amigos y amigas, hoy en la Unión Europea cuenta con un marco normativo coherente para alcanzar la neutralidad climática en el año 2050. Y ante este negacionismo del que me he referido, los socialdemócratas seguiremos apostando por las energías renovables, por el autoconsumo, por la electrificación del transporte y por la rehabilitación y eficiencia energética de nuestras viviendas. Una transición energética que debe ser justa. No podemos hacer frente a la descarbonización sin pensar en las personas, en sus preocupaciones, en su futuro. La transición ecológica debe ser un instrumento contra la desigualdad y una oportunidad para el cambio que vincule innovación, digitalización y empleo digno. Porque si algo nos ha enseñado la globalización es que no puede haber ganadores y perdedores. Si unos pierden, al final todos perdemos. Y alcanzar la neutralidad climática con justicia social en 2050 también requiere valentía desde un nuevo multilateralismo. Necesitamos justicia climática entre países, porque sabemos que los países en desarrollo son los que menos contribuyen al cambio climático, pero son los que más sufren sus efectos. Mejorar la financiación y el apoyo de los países en desarrollo para su adaptación climática y evitar más pérdidas y daño es un compromiso inaplazable. El pasado julio, el secretario general de Naciones Unidas, Antonio Guterres, nos advirtió que la era del calentamiento global ha terminado y ahora es el momento de la ebullición global. Sus palabras reflejan la incertidumbre sobre cómo puede reaccionar el planeta ante las temperaturas más altas. Pero donde no puede haber incertidumbre es en nuestra respuesta. Bajo el liderazgo de la presidencia española del Consejo de la Unión Europea, la próxima COP28 en Dubái debe alcanzar compromisos firmes para el cumplimiento estricto del Acuerdo de París, porque nuestra vida está en juego y la única alternativa es que seamos capaces de garantizar este futuro. Querida ministra, querida Teresa, a menudo nos recuerdas que todos debemos ser activistas de la acción climática. Ante la ignorancia y la indiferencia recogidas en la Declaración de Estocolmo y que medio siglo después todavía practican la derecha y la extrema derecha, debemos honrar nuestra palabra dada con más acción y con más ambición. Amigas y amigos, la batalla contra el cambio climático nos exige coraje y determinación. También nos exige liderazgo y solidaridad. Y nos exige, sobre todo, pasar de las palabras a la acción. Así que vamos a por ello. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Irachi, for your inspiring words. And now we continue with the workshop. I'm going to introduce, I don't think any of you need any introduction, but I will try a little bit. First of all, we have Teresa Ribera, Vice President of the Spanish government and as Minister responsible for ecological transition and demographic challenge. And I know that you're a real champion when it comes to the social, climate and energy policies. And as the President of the European Council, you're doing really good work, like finalizing the much-needed nature restoration law. Teresa, please. And second, we have Maros Sefcovic. I would summarize him as our new Green Deal boss in the European Commission. But of course, you've also have done a lot of work in interinstitutional relations and foresights. Please come onto the stage. Some people have sometimes criticized me that I focus a lot on climate and I do not focus much on the social side of climate. Someone sitting in the front row has made that statement many times to me, but fortunately, in our political family, we have people like Nicholas Smith, who never loses the social dimension from his side. Please come to the stage, our commissioner. Please. Yeah, you want to sit here? No?
Okay. Yeah.
No problem. Happy to have you here. I'm going to have a sit. So let me start with Teresa, of course. I mean, we're in Malaga, and we know that Spain is one of the countries in Europe that's heavily affected by, let's say, climate change, and adaptation is not a plan B anymore. And we know that you've done a lot of work when it comes to climate adaptation during the last international climate negotiations at the COP27, and this is, of course, something that we want to continue on. But do you agree that we come to a point in time where we cannot afford anymore to choose between climate mitigation and adaptation? What do you think would be the next crucial steps for climate adaptation in the EU and globally?
Thank you, Mohammed. And allow me to go into a very broader perspective before coming to your question. Because first, I come today from Brussels, 6 a.m. flight from Brussels to Malaga, to celebrate something which, according to my own understanding, is a very important milestone. It's not anymore an issue of preserving or conserving nature, we need to restore. And if we want to be resilient to climate impacts, if we want to have an Europe which is climate neutral, if we want social justice, we need to restore our nature. And as Irache was saying, it is because we have counted on a very engaged political group in Europe working for this law that today we are almost there. We are almost at the very end of this procedure. So thanks a lot to you all. My second comment. Nicolas is a champion in social issues, but you can count on people dealing with environmental issues having this social mindset, this social hurt when you talk to your family. So Maros is also a champion on social and climate issues, and I also try to bring this flag because it is very important. I think that yes, we cannot deal anymore as if it were different issues, reducing emissions and adapting to a different climate. Both things go along together. And sometimes there are people that tend to say, the climate agenda is a threat. Sorry, what type of misperception is that one? What it is a real threat is not counting on a climate agenda. We need to ensure an effective and committed climate agenda to avoid finding ourselves again paying honor, paying a contribute to those victims of climate change that pay with their lives what it means living in a different climate world. So I think that yes, we need to invest in adaptation. And invest in adaptation is also trying to understand a little bit better what it means. It implies working at different levels of action, but I think that Europe can do it. Europe must do it. We have gone a longest way forward in these last years, and we need to keep on doing. So we have done a lot at the domestic level. This presidency is very committed. It is not the only one, but I think that we will be in a position to say in very short answer, yes, we need to do it. Yes, it is time to do it. Yes, we cannot avoid doing it.
Yeah, there's always this false contradiction between being social on the one side and being pro-climate on the other side. I think with the nature restoration law, it was severely attacked, stating that it's too much. People are saying that we are in favor of tackling climate change, but I think clearly said by you, we need restored ecological systems to make sure that climate change can be addressed. Maros, our new first executive vice president responsible for the Green Deal. When it comes to adaptation, when it comes to adaptation policies, what do you think could be let's say, the first steps we can take in Europe to make sure that that is back on the agenda?
First and foremost, I really would like to thank and congratulate Teresa and Cesar for this very arduous negotiations of yesterday, but more importantly for the successful conclusion, because you would remember, Mohammed, before summer we've been not in such a high spirits that this actually could be done, so there was a lot of hard work done. I very much appreciate the close cooperation between Commission, the Presidency, and if you have such a committed President of the Council like Teresa, the things immediately look brighter, because we are talking about very important piece of legislation, nature restoration law, but I would like to add also another important element, and this is the hard work Teresa put into the new electricity market design, which is actually very cryptic name for our policies to lower the prices of energy across the Europe and to bringing and accommodating more renewables in our system, and that also happened under the leadership of Teresa and Spanish presidency, and it's very, very crucial. So if it comes to the adaptation, you always have to look for the balance, where the adaptation starts and then when mitigation continues. And I think that we realized over the last couple of years that they both have to go together. From one side, we have to adapt to the fact that, as we see, every single summer, every single year that the temperature is rising. But at the same time, we have to do all we can in mitigation efforts to make sure that we would keep this global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, because we see what is happening with the planet where we are still well below 1.5, and already how unbearable it is for the people in Europe, but also across the world. I mean, and we are not only counting the damages in the billions, we are already counting the damages in the ultimate price, which are human lives, which is human suffering, and therefore I think it just shows how important our efforts in these regards are. So if it comes to the adaptation, I think we have to use all the opportunities which the science, which the new technologies, and which the, I would say, determination of the policymakers are offering us. And therefore, I think that the work of the socialists and democrats in the parliament, but also in the member states, to highlight the importance of this effort is so crucial. And I think working with the public opinion, cultivating the support for the Green Deal would be even more important in all these pre-election debates, which on these topics would be paradoxically very difficult. What I would like to thank the group for is that, as you said, Mohammed, very rightly so, and I'm sure that Nicola would elaborate on this, that we always highlight the fact that we not only need the transition, but it has to be just, it has to be fair, it has to have a human element in it, and we always have to think about the most vulnerable people, because they are suffering the most also if it comes to adaptation, mitigation, and very often they have to bring the biggest sacrifices. So I would say these are the key elements: be fair, be just, be forward-looking, and be ambitious if it comes to tackling the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Maras. I think you made a very good bridge for me also to go to Nicolas. I think for our group, the just transition has always been at the core of climate change, and I can say that you were one of the people that made sure that we kept that at the core of our policy making. When we talk about mitigation, there's usually a business case. There's usually money to be made. Solar panel installation, windmills, etc. When it comes to adaptation, there's the price. I mean, there's no business case, but we're talking about making sure we don't have the damages, making sure people, vulnerable people, can continue living in the places where they live, that are directly affected by extreme weather. We've seen, for example, the floods in Greece, where a significant part of agricultural land was destroyed. So my question to you, how do you see this intersection? How can we make sure that adaptation policies have positive effects on, let's say, social aspects?
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. And I'm not only the champion of social, I want to be the champion of social and ecological challenges. So, but this is exactly the question, and this is the challenge also for us to explain that you cannot have a better society, a more just society, a fairer society, if we do not really, in a bold way, mitigate this climate threat which is destroying our societies, and which risks at the end to give just good opportunities to the most wealth, or to the wealthiest, and those who are less wealthy, they will suffer the most from this climate catastrophe. So the challenge, the social challenge and the climate challenge, they are absolutely interlinked. And that's why we have to make clear that we as a movement, we have totally integrated the social dimension into the climate policy dimension. And no, the one does not go without the other. That's the first point. And this is a challenge because I am often in the European Parliament and I listen to the discourses, the speeches, especially from the extreme right, but sometimes also from other parts of this parliament, how they finally fool people saying that, well, climate policy, this is not as serious as we pretend it to be, and it's a way to take people's money out of the pocket. And it's finally some kind of a crazy socialist invention. This is the challenge for the next election, because this discourse we have to face. And it is about saving the Green Deal, which means, in a way, saving the living conditions for the future of our planet, and especially also of Europe, because Europe is not an exception. It has been said. I was very impressed by a movie I saw yesterday in another gathering. And when you see the climate change, it's not tomorrow. Climate change is absolutely today. And the catastrophes are taking place today, and they are just accelerating. So this is the first thing. Now, how can we do that? It's a question of money, obviously, absolutely. But it's also a question of how our economies and societies function. The transformation we are going for is the biggest transformation probably ever, because not only is it so big, it is very, very, in a very short time it has to take place. Because when we are talking about 2030 or 35 or 50, that's very short. And we have to do that in a very short time. Now, the point is that obviously this means for many people to accept changes. It's the change in their private personal life. If you have to pay more for energy, this is the first point. We have really to pay attention to that. If you are encouraged to buy an electric car, this means, have you the money to buy it when electric cars are much more expensive than others? So these are the very practical issues we have to deal with people's concerns. And we can do it. That's a question of money, but it's also a question of organization. The second one is about business also, because people do not understand that we are supposed to get out of the fossil period. And when you look how the profits of the big energy companies have been in the last years, well, this is astonishing, because they never made as high profits than now. So they are the winners, because we spoke about the winners of this. So we have to make sure that there is some equal and fairness in that. That's why those who said, well, the super profits have to be taxed in a different way, this has to be done. And this money has to be redistributed. And my third point is obviously also about how we can accompany the transition. And I know Maus is doing a lot in a very positive and optimistic way. I read the new chief of the GIEC, he's a Scottish, I think. He said, well, I do not like to have this catastrophic only discourse. We have also to bring in a positive and optimistic discourse in that there are a lot of good opportunities. But this is a question of policy making. The good opportunities only exist if you seize them, if you create the environment to make them real. And that's our job as social democrats, to show that we are ready to make these opportunities real. And this is about industry, this is about new jobs, this is about reskilling, this is about giving people the feeling that this huge change is not going at the expense of their basic security concerns. In the job, in the income, in the way also for themselves and their kids. So this means we have to accompany these changes, we have to accompany these transformations. And I think that we are there to make this new social ecological contract. Yes. This is the idea. We have to make the social ecological contract a reality.
And I really like your energy. Of course, the positive element and the positive change that could be created by adaptation and by climate policies, I think is a very important narrative for Social Democrats. Teresa, feel free to respond. Maros also. By the way, if you would like to address, if you have a question, raise your hands. There will be people in the room walking around with microphones, and I'll give you the floor to ask a question to one of these panelists. So, in the meantime, Teresa, please take the floor.
Thank you. And I wanted not to respond, but to keep on building on what Nicolas has been saying, because in fact, from his comments, what we can read is that we all need to be champions. If our soul is to work and to provide possibilities and opportunities to citizens, we need to keep in mind this context, so to think in social and ecological terms to improve the way of life of people. And it is not only dealing with labor rights, of course, ecological legislation, of course, it's thinking about the urban agenda, it's thinking about access to fresh water, food security, biodiversity laws that we were talking yesterday in Brussels, health, housing, which is part of the urban agenda, industrial updates so that the goods that we produce are conceived in a way that reduce our consumption, not only in the value chain, but also in their use in day-to-day. Re-skilling, very important. This is also a very important divide, where the skilled people may be, so to take full advantage of these opportunities. So education is also part of this transformation. This means that it is not only thinking in terms of energy, of course, it is thinking in terms of where are the vulnerabilities, the physical vulnerabilities when floods takes place, who counts on a good insurance system and who will be losing everything because the insurance industry is not accessible for many people, available for many people. What about access to fresh water, So how it impacts in farmers or how it impacts in cities for consumers and households. Everything is going to be changing, and we know enough to do a lot, but we still know not enough to be as effective as we need to be in this time frame, 10 years to transform almost everything. So we need to be quite committed and quite well organized, with the principles very clear in our minds. This has a very relevant social impact. It irritates people, it fools people, because of course we are talking about the very basics for every single person. But at the same time, we need to seize these opportunities because the challenge is huge. But we should be working to ensure that the opportunities are available. And I think that the fact that we were in a position to provide the inputs for the mandate of this European cycle was very important, to respond to crises that we had never imagined that we would be in a position to face. But these, how to say, challenges, not to call them crises, may come back with different aspects in the time to be. So for the next cycle, we need to be investing right now on what we are going to propose, how the adaptation policy is being combined with the mitigation, but we do not talk so much about adaptation, and there is no single country, not even European countries, or Canada, or the United States, that can cope without a previous understanding on what it means and how we prepare ourselves to be ready to respond and how we reduce the risk to the type of wildfires we have been witnessing in Canada or in Hawaii, with the type of floods that we have been experiencing in Europe, Greece, with the type of droughts that we have been suffering for such a long time. So things that are becoming the new normal, that we need to anticipate and to prepare to be ready to respond, to reduce its impacts, but also to create new opportunities so that in this preparation, in this anticipation, there are good opportunities for jobs, and there is a, how to say, safer context for households and families. What about housing? Nicolas was saying, which is absolutely true. Extreme temperatures are not lived in the same manner when we count on a good isolated house than when it is not the case. Living near a flooding area that used to flood every, 100 years is not the same that living in a flooding area that becomes flooded every 2 years. And so on and so on. Farmers. We have seen some of our political rivals trying to fool farmers. Sorry, if the soil is degraded, if the climate becomes extreme, there is no farming production. There is death. So investing in water infrastructures in a different manner, investing in urban agenda in a different manner, investing in the financial business not to waste money creating additional harm, but ensuring that the financial flows go there where we can create wealth, climate-proof wealth, and a basic fair access to prosperity is very important, the insurance industry. So probably we are those who have done much, we Europeans in the world, but there is still a long way to go. And we have the means, the capacities, and the political commitment to do it, and we need to accelerate our action to be sure that we can deliver in due time. I think that none of our children or grandchildren could pardon us if we do not take the right answers today, which is not easy. We need to craft things and we need to explain things. I guess that what Nicola was saying, the main role that Maros has been working for a long time already, how we can be sure that people do understand why we do this in such an accelerated manner. It's not that we want to create burdens, it's that we want to ensure that we can benefit from wealth in the time to be. So how we can create these partnerships, how we can be humble and talking to the different partners to craft the best solutions is very important. The way we do things do also matter, not only the things we do, but the way we do things do also matter. That's also matter. Thank you.
Very important point on when it comes to finance and especially reallocating of the financial means. If I'm not mistaken, next week we also have an S&D event on sustainable finance. I'm going to advertise it a little bit here. So please come and join to talk about that important topic next week. Maros, please.
Yep. I think that Teresa and Nicolas kind of built very nicely the bridge to what I wanted to say, because they, I think, described in very eloquent manner that anxiety which was being built in our society over the last 2 years. And we have to be honest, the people in Europe went through a lot. I mean, we still remember COVID, then the war in Ukraine, then skyrocketing energy prices, inflation pressures, and now these terrible events which are unfolding in the Middle East. So it's just natural that after all these events, there is kind of anxiety in the society about cost of living standards, about the future job situation for our children, about the social cohesion. And here I think the work of the socialists and Democrats would be so crucial, because we are the natural partners to address these anxieties, to come up with the solutions, to propose the way forward. And therefore the idea of Nicolas, of this new social and ecological contract is so important, because the world has simply changed. And I'm very glad, Mohammed, that you are addressing also the issue of financing. And I think we need to find a way how to also address and put under certain pressure also financial industries, because they also will have to change how they do the business. Simply, Teresa was referring to very important issue of insurance. You know, you have a farmer who started farming 20 years ago, built very nice farm close to the forest. And it was very good, very profitable operation. And now the insurance company will tell them, okay, we are not insuring you anymore because you are or under flood risk or under fire risk. This is simply not acceptable. Because again, it would be the most vulnerable people who would suffer from the fact that the things like insurance will not be accessible to the apartments or to their businesses. Second, I think very important thing, they will have also to kind of realize the fact that we are in the 21st century economy. So it means that we will need totally different financial products than in the past. I think that if you are talking about electric vehicles or about the deployment of the new technologies like the heat pumps, we have to make sure that they will be affordable. And therefore, we probably will have to go through the new financing model, through this green leasing system, through monthly payment, and not to kind of transfer the whole burden on the citizens, because they're kind of nervous about it. Can I afford it? How much would it cost? Maybe I will stay with the system I have here because I don't know if I can afford it in the future. So we will need to develop also, I would say, the thinking along the line how to really change also the structure of the financial industry to address, I would say, these new challenges of the future. And I totally agree with Nikos. As you know, I'm also responsible for the common purchase of gas, which was the decision of the head of states and government and energy ministers as a reaction to the last year drama. And when you see at look at the structure of profits for how much the gas was bought in the US, for how much it was sold in Europe, that's simply unacceptable. I mean, we just have to bring more transparency. We need to work much more with the European common aggregation of our political weight, of our economic strength, because we just simply have to use it much more assertively on the global scale. And if you allow me the last point upon which we've been also working very closely with Teresa, these are the future-oriented technology, for example, like the wind industry. We've been the pioneers. We brought this technology to the world, be it photovoltaic panels, be it wind industry. And then, because we are fair players, our industry is suffering. So therefore, I think we have to, again, bring new approach to public procurement, to the support of our pioneering, sustainable driven companies, and look what we can do with making sure that the price is not only criterion when it comes to the public procurement, that we have to pay much more attention to the competitive sustainability, to the pre-qualification criteria, to make sure that we would prefer the companies which are responsible to environment, which respect social standards, and which simply are doing business in how we Europeans want to live our lives. I think we have seen that we put this new approach on the table if it comes in the last wind energy package with the battery regulation, and I think again this would be something which will have to be developed even further, and which would transform into the new trade policy after the European elections and when the next commission would be in place, because simply we have to project our approach to economy also to the way how we will be trading with our partners and how we will be also ready to protect the industry in Europe when it's sustainable, when it's progressive, and when it's really using this new technology to save the planet. And the race is on. And the race is not about the economies of the past, but about the economies of the future. And this race would be very fierce, and we just have to be ready. And therefore, my last point would be, when you look through different opinion polls, that what the people in the elections are looking for in their leaders. And I discovered that one of the categories that people like the most are so-called happy warriors. And I think that if it comes to the tackling climate change, our group, we have to be these happy warriors, to be clearly aware of the challenges, of the problems, of the difficulties, but at the same time to be always ready to be optimistic and to come up with a positive, good solutions for our people, that we know how to address the problem, we know how to bring the solutions, and we know how to bring new ideas to the table. Thank you, Mohamed.
Thank you, Maros. Before I go to the, yes. Before we go to the audience, Teresa, I still have a question for you. Next, in a couple of weeks, you will lead the negotiations on behalf of the EU in the climate conference, and one of the elements there is, of course, the loss and damage framework around adaptation. Hopefully, you will succeed and finalize, I think, this very important topic. But if we would take that framework, do you believe that maybe we in the EU could maybe create a similar framework within the EU on adaptation, where we cover maybe some of the risks, help vulnerable people, but also maybe highlight some of the already existing instruments and create some policy coherence there? I would really love to hear some your comments on that.
Thank you, Mohammed. And I think that yes, this is very important and challenging. Something that we have not underlined enough is that it is not only that we are a little bit old-fashioned in some aspects, and we need to update, as we have been doing in many different policy frameworks, but it should also cover not only financial flows from private sector, but also taxing and fiscal policies. I think that we need to think in a different manner. But then the opportunity of the COP reminds us that adaptation is a must. It's not just a local issue. It is a global issue with transboundary impacts through collective no, but also transboundary. I mean, if there is a country with droughts, there may be problems on food production, there may be problems if it is a very poor society in terms of migration and poverty of families. So I think that we need this framework happening at the domestic level, and we need the external dimension in our European policies, how we relate with our partners in third countries, and how we contribute to build a much more peaceful and secure world through the multilateralism. And this has a very important dimension when talking about adaptation and losses and damages. So, of course, the more we reduce emissions, the lower level of impacts we may be suffering. But even if we could go to zero emissions from now to 2 years, which is impossible, we could still be suffering the inertia of the climate system, so there will still be impacts that may create much suffer, not only in Europe, but very much in particular in the most vulnerable countries in developing areas of the world. So we need to take this into consideration. Europe needs to be a committed partner, co-creating development, but co-creating resilience to climate impacts elsewhere. So yes, I think that we need to create a global framework for adaptation at the European level, but this European set of policies for domestic purpose should be completed with the external dimension being enhanced, because we have learned a lot in the last years, but we need to be much more clear and much more committed in this external dimension on climate impacts elsewhere and how we can support many of our partners.
I mean, I think a very important point that, of course, adaptation and loss and damage is not only something we do to help others, but at the end of the day, we are all connected. So solving a problem elsewhere is basically also solving our own problem. It's a very interesting point. Nicolas, please.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one, in my view, very central idea. I like the expression climate justice, as much as just transition, but I think climate justice, because I think we have to show first that for the time being, climate is not just, because those who are suffering the most are the less wealthy. And the point is also there is a danger that those who are the less wealthy pay the highest price in climate policies. This is something we have to be aware of. And what is the strong demand of our citizens? The strong demand of our citizens is more fairness, more justice. They have the feeling that our societies have become more unfair or unfairer and less just. And this is the response we have to give now. And I think that when you look at who is polluting, who has the highest level of emissions, it's not the minimum wage earner.
No.
It's those who are like us, I have to say it, who fly a lot, who have the biggest cars and so on, are not well. So this is something we really have to take fully into account. And climate justice means also, if we want that we cannot rely on markets only. Because markets, they have a role of allocation, but they are blind. And when you take, when we use markets at the end, well, it's clear that those who are the most vulnerable in society are the most affected. And therefore, we always need correction mechanism. Also with ETS. ETS is a good step, but ETS does not resolve the climate justice issue. So we have to have corrections. Now, I know, and you fought a lot for that, we have the Social Climate Fund.
Yes.
Very good step. 76 billion, I think.
Yes.
Thanks to the parliament, by the way. Thanks to the parliament. Yeah, you
Yes,
can
yeah,
applaud
definitely. No, I know, I
parliament
know.
for that. That's not enough. That's not enough. We have to do more because the impact is much higher. So I think this is the question, to save the acceptability of all that. This is about climate justice. This is about how we can help those who are in two ways affected by the climate deterioration and by the mitigation. So we have really to deal with that. And this is the big part in our society. And this is also, it's just about climate. But at the end, it starts to become an issue for our democracy. This is the biggest and the most dangerous issue. When we listen to the extreme right, well, we see and we have to understand it has become an issue for our democracy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I mean, for me as social democrat, I've observed that in the past decades, we also have started to believe too much in the market, that the market will solve all of our problems. But in a transition, when there's a mismatch between supply and demand, where there's no market functioning, I think we have to reassess the position of governments. And only decoupling and de-risking, these two terms are quite fashionable these days, I think is not enough. I really believe we need to take the seat and guide companies and society towards the end goal, and it has to be just or it will not exist. So I think let's be as governments much more the co-investors, sitting next to the markets and driving them exactly to the place where we want them to be, which is a climate neutral society where vulnerable people have been helped and create better housing conditions, better jobs for the next society, for the next generation. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go to the floor. The first question, please stand up, tell us your name and the question, and of course to who you're addressing the question.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Marlene Elgershuizen. I am in the PES delegation of the Dutch PvdA and Vice President of Rainbow Rose. And my question is to the panel. I very much believe that climate justice is a very, very much a social democratic project, a lot. But I'm here from the Netherlands, so I'm going to ask a Dutch question. And in my country, the Greens are now very much cooperating with the Social Democrats, even moving towards a very close alliance, and some might even say a merger. So what does the panel think about forming a much, much closer alliance with the Greens in the European Parliament, or even might be a merger?
Who dares to answer this question? In the parliament, I always joke with the Greens. I always say, we need a progressive, at least alliance against extreme right, which is increasing, especially seeing the EPP aligning with them. And I always make this joke that we can simply rename our groups SDG, Socialists, Democrats, and Greens. And but not everyone likes this joke. But please.
I would like to answer your question, changing the sense of the direction. I think that we cannot call ourselves social democrats if we are not green, because of the reasons that Nicolas was explaining. And then there may be Greens who partner with the Social Democrats, and there may be Greens that partner with liberals or with right-wing because they think that the market, even being blind, can respond to the green demands, even if it is not sufficiently socially fair. It's not the most usual case, but it can be. So you can be green, rich, and being happy to be green and rich, but your social commitment is not so strong. So I think that, yes, we need to work with the Greens. Normally, the large share of our Green colleagues go along the same lines that we are stating right now. But I don't think that this is necessary, the single response. I think that we need to be partners. I think that we need to find all the possibilities to work together. But the main question could be to ourselves. We need to be Greens, to be Social Democrats.
I really like this answer, although, you know, I'm Dutch, and thank you for asking a very difficult question for me as being Dutch. But I mean, the answer of you, Teresa, social democracy, you cannot be Social Democrats without being Green. I think this is something I really want to underline. You know, our social policies always come, I think, with a Green core. So thank you for that answer. Maybe one of you would like to touch this question?
Yeah, I think that there is always very close cooperation and collaboration between Greens and Social Democrats, and I think each of these parties are bringing something to the table. We know very well how our Green colleagues are approaching different files and different solutions. And what I think is very important on tackling the challenges linked with the transition is that Social Democrats are always bringing into the forefront the social dimension of the transition. Because some of the solutions could go further, could go faster, but at the same time we have to make sure that they are socially acceptable, that they are socially fair, that we can, let's say, offset by social measures the possible problems linked with the introduction of some of these measures, that we would kind of phase in the pace which would help us to preserve and develop further the social cohesion and social contract, as Nicholas has described it. So I think that the cooperation is there, but I very much appreciate that the Socialists and Democrats are focusing also on how to do the right thing, how to do the best possible solution if it comes to the green transition agenda, but at the same time not to lose the sight of the fact that it has to be socially fair, it has to be socially just, and that you have to think about the most vulnerable people who very often are also faced with the biggest challenges how to adapt to the new system. So I think that this collaboration is good, it will work for the future, but I think that each of us are bringing to the table something special, and that's, I would say, to the benefit of the democratic discussions in Europe and, of course, in the European Parliament. I don't know, Nicholas, if you would like to.
Nicholas agrees. So we agree on the goal, but we sometimes disagree on the pace and the inclusion, of course, of everyone, because we always say we want to leave no one behind. I go to the next question from the audience. Please state your name and the question.
This Andriukaitis, former Commissioner for Health and Food Safety. But my question is, now I see two strong pillars, social and ecological and transition. What do you think about the possibilities to include a health pillar and to speak about togetherness, social, health and ecological transition? Because we need to see such triangle. Because we know very well how damages create air pollution and so on to people's health directly, keeping about premature deaths and so on. The figures shows we need to see those three pillars when we're speaking about more coherent, more socially, more green, and more healthy social democracy. Thank you.
Nicholas, would you want to respond?
I think that's absolutely true. Health policies, we have experienced it through the COVID, how important it is to have a European health policy. And we finally built one by necessity due to the pandemic. But climate change is really also impacting the situation of health dramatically, and especially for, again, for the most vulnerable, for the workers in agriculture, in construction. Therefore, we have now taken special provisions to protect these workers. So I think when I talk about this social, ecological, that means that obviously in social we have to have a very good and more just health policy, because health has suffered also from budgetary cuts in the past. And we have seen if our health systems are not resilient, are not well equipped, well, we cannot face the big challenges like a pandemic or other health challenges. And I think this is absolutely has to be part of our social program, that we want to have a better health policy, more equal access or better access. That's, by the way, I have to mention it because otherwise people think that I've forgotten it. It's one of the principles of our social pillar. That's important, and that's why we have to work on that also and continue working on this health policy. So I fully agree, and this means perhaps if there is one day a treaty revision, we have to revamp the article on health.
And include health, definitely. Yes, if you have a question, raise your hand so that the people with the microphone see you. Please.
Thank you for an interesting discussion. My name is Arjan. I'm from the Swedish Social Democratic Youth League. I wanted to say that if you politicians would have listened to us youths 20 years ago, you would have not been in this situation today. So my question is, what are you going to do to not repeat the same mistake? Thank you.
It's a very hard question, very hard question. 20 years ago, I considered myself young, so let's see what the others would reply on that. No, Teresa.
Very similarly, 20 years ago I was saying these things, and today I'm trying to pave the way to avoid people feeling the fear and feeling the anger of not counting on responses. I think that the anger of the youth is justified, and I think that it has taken too long, and Irache's comments were very clear. I mean, when we read the final declaration of the Stockholm Conference in 1972, you break in tears. Because in fact, the messages were so clear, and it has taken so long that now we only have, 10 years.
Yeah.
This intensity in the transformation is difficult. We need to be very, 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 empathetic and capable to convince people that institutions deserve trust, and institutions need to be sufficiently committed and quick to make this happen in a fair, in a just manner, because we run out of time. And it's not just denouncing all the things that do not work. The difficulty is how we go beyond that. So to identify solutions, opportunities, seizing these things that need to change, because otherwise it's quite frustrating. So youth is very, very important to keep the pressure on those that still think, well, maybe it's not the right moment, we can delay a little bit, we need a break in regulation or in changes in policies. Sorry, there are things that do not wait. And beautifully, the laws of the physics and the nature do not wait. Do not wait for the right moment to introduce the changes that we need. So I was being an activist, young activist, claiming for justice. So I think that, yes, we need not to waste more time.
And I love the consistency of your question. I remember you asked the same question during the Yes conference, if I'm not mistaken. So very good, very good.
And if you allow me,
yes,
Mohammed, just one reaction, because I think that the role of young people and youth in the current debate is absolutely important, because here, I mean, we all are convinced, we believe the science, we look at the weather forecast, we are watching the news, and I don't think that anyone in this room needs convincing that climate change is happening, that the warming of the planet is accelerating, and that it has absolutely devastating impact and consequences on the life of people living in Europe and everywhere in the world. But you know very well that this is not the case in all corners of Europe, in all corners of the world. If you look at some countries close to Europe, across one little channel or across the Atlantic, so we see that the debate there is extremely polarized, and that actually this, I would say, scientific truth is heavily contested. And I think Nicola was very rightly describing the course with which especially the extreme right will take to the election. So we need young people to keep this permanently on the radar screen, to help us to communicate on this issue, to use your super skills with social media, with all the ability to present it in very clear case to the older generation, to bring this youth positive energy that we have a problem, but we're also ready to solve it, and we support this positive change, because we are doing our best, I believe, with Teresa. We've been always 20 years ago young, but I think that the decisions what we are taking right now will definitely be affecting especially your generation. So we need your energy, we need your support, we need your ability to communicate through all the platforms, because this is not the battle which is already won, because you see that there is still a lot of climate skeptics on all levels in political circles everywhere in the world, including in Europe, and I think that this would be one of the battle lines in the next also European elections. Who would be elected, on what platform, and how we would address the issue of the climate change. And I'm sure there will be a lot of resistance and fake truth and fake arguments brought into this debate, and therefore the role of young people in mobilizing, I would say, the opinion and support for the policies which are tackling climate change and support the just transition would be so important. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Maros. We still have time for a couple of questions. Josias?
Thank you. My name is Joas Orlikas, a member of SND Group from Lithuania. I fully agree what you said about the situation and that our efforts to increase the social and environmental or ecological contract. I fully agree with my friend Vytenis Andriukaitis that health also should be included loudly, because in different poll opinions, the health is in very high position. But I have a question about two positions. Regarding the election, we should convince our citizens to support us, to create more supporters for that. And this is very thin question, because the populist or right wing is fighting against all this possible negative aspects for someone in this stage. And you, Nicola, mentioned this differences and they're increasing the profit for the international big companies in this very difficult situation. I think we need to find the instrument how we can prepare the new taxes or new tools to have the more possibilities to support our citizens, not showing this disproportion between the huge companies and ordinary our citizens. And the second one, more responsibility on the Commission, on European Union level. Because it's very difficult to convince each member state to implement this, not having the stronger input from European Union institutions. Thank you very much.
I want to take as much questions as possible, but can we do, no, let's just do a quick answer and then go to another question, answer, so that as much people can get the opportunity to ask a question. Who wants to reply on this briefly?
Well, I fully agree, because at the end it's a question who will pay for it. And so we cannot have the biggest possible transformation and everything remains the same. So I think we have to adjust also our taxation systems and pay and make those pay who for the time being do not really pay what they should. So when we are discussing about, by the way, why not this financial transaction tax was already on the table of the Union and then was taken away. These are billions of euros we could mobilize to invest, but also to guarantee a more climate justice. So taxation is a core issue in that, clear. But we know it's not easy to decide on this. I will not go further. So this is absolutely true.
Thank you. Then we go to the question, Mr. in the back. Sir in the back.
Hola,
please.
buenos días a todos. Soy Jimmy Audico, soy secretario de Transición Ecológica de PSOE de París. I will try to ask, to make my question in English. So I have two questions. I think that ecological transition is something very important. And we need really all the European citizens to understand how it's important the transition project in their daily life. And my question is, if it is possible to create a special fund in order to support, you know, the electric cars area in order to decrease the price, because people need cars in European country, in all the countries in the world, to work for their daily life. And we have seen now in every city, most of cities in European countries, they are prohibited cars. And I think maybe SND can make some proposal in order to create a special fund, you know, to decrease the price of electric cars. I think that can be a real good project which can be understood by all the citizens in Europe.
I think
and the second question is about the creation of the international fund to support all the transition projects through the world. And I would like to know how we can increase that fund, because it's not really enough to challenge all of the transition projects in the world. So in the European level, how we can do to increase that fund.
Clear.
Thank you very much.
The first question is about access to transport. Maybe that's a good question for you, Maros. And the second part on international climate finance, maybe Teresa, you could elaborate on that. Maros, on...
Yeah, I would say that the response should be structured along different lines. The first and foremost, of course, what I think it's very much in the DNA of socialists and democrats is that we should develop as much as possibility affordable public transportation, to use the biking path, to simply create the solutions also in the urban and suburban area where you can actually really minimize the need for the personalized transport. But I agree with you that you have the areas and you have the situations where you simply would need the car, and I understand the worries that the electric vehicles at this stage are more expensive than combustion engines, and what would it mean in the future. Of course, as you know, there are the schemes which are run by different member states with the different type of, I would say, also support for the purchase of electric vehicles. But I think that we would need a little bit more systemic solution for that. And I would recall again what I said at the beginning of my remarks. We just simply need the green financial engineering in this regard. We need a new type of leasing mechanisms which would make also electric vehicles, heat pumps, and all the other technological solutions more affordable for the people. We need to find new possibilities for blending public and private funds, which simply would make this transition affordable and socially just for our citizens. So this, I would say, would be the one answer. And second one, I think that it was answered very, very nicely before. But if we are looking, for example, for the financial instrument like social climate fund, what I think should be very important, and I think it would be a very good task for socialists and democrats to make sure that this time this fund would really be used not as a, I would say, automatic income for the treasuries in our member states, but the sums which will be there would really be allocated for addressing the difficult situation of the most vulnerable people across the Europe. Mm-hmm. That this fund is there for them. It's just not for beefing up the, let's say, public financing situation, but it's a fund which is coming from Europe to the most vulnerable people across the Europe to address the cost of the transition. So there have been few ideas to the question of the gentleman there. Thank you.
Would you like to maybe state something on the second part of the question?
Yes, on the second part of the question, I would like to remind us that Europe is the part of the world that has contributed the most to the international climate finance mechanism and the climate-proof development understanding in other countries. And I think that we need to keep it strong and to keep committed along these lines. But there is also something which is very important, which is that it is not going to work if we only think in terms of how much we transfer from a public budget from an European member state towards somewhere else. That's not going to be enough because the cost, the United Nations report on the adaptation gap says that we could be needing $300 billion per year to cope with the adaptation requirements and the loss and damage all over the world. So we need to reorientate all the financial flows. And we need to open a very complicated debate. And in the mandate for the negotiation for the COP, we have got this for this year, which is, please, let's think in different terms. How we can create something that reflects today's capacity connected to the polluter pays principle. Why would you not invite to fossil fuel companies to invest in a different type of development in third countries? They are going to say no for the time being, but let's see. How we introduce this reference to maritime transportation or to aviation so that it reflects a different update in today's travels. Today's travels is not just Western citizens traveling and the rest do not travel, or merchandise coming from Western countries to Western countries. It has a different mapping behind that should be helping that countries and companies producing fuels, fossil fuels, do contribute to the cost, but certain services and activities that we also demand, but we are not the only ones that do demand this type of goods, do also contribute to a different type of development. So keeping this understanding of ensuring that all financial flows are climate-proof in an increased manner. And I have a second comment to your first question and to your second question, but also thinking on the previous questions. I think that, yes, we need to work on what we offer to citizens, and this is very important in this meeting, thinking towards the campaign and so on. And I said before, we need to be green. It's not that the Greens need to be social democrats, that's fantastic, but we need to be green. But we need to be young. We need to think with a forward-looking approach on what type of challenges and problems we need to respond. So, of course, we need to create this flexibility, this positive environment, this willingness to do more, but we also need to provide proposals that have a refreshed understanding on the problems and the answers. And I think that this is something that we still need to invest much more in our own groups.
Perfect. I'm going to take the last two questions very briefly. Only two questions. Please, you and the sir at the back, and then I'm going to wrap up.
I actually got half of my questions answered. So I'm from Kurdistan of Iraq, and my question was that some countries still in the world, their economy completely depends on fossil fuel. And because of that, we still have a hard time, moving away from that. It will break our economy down, for example. How flexible these acts are, how inclusive these green acts are to include these third world countries without breaking down their economies. I mean, climate is not exclusive to just Europe or America or part of the world. It affects everyone. If we're still polluting the climate, no matter what you do, it's not going to be enough. Basically, we're undoing all your efforts. So how much effort is being put into that initiative? Yes. And how much have you thought of putting consequences on those countries in terms of sanctions and things like that? Thank you.
Clear. Second question, I'm going to wrap. please.
Je m'appelle Gafar Darawan, je suis nouveau représentant régional de gouvernement Kurdistan à Espagne et en Portugal. Tarina, c'est mon camarade tout à l'heure qui a parlé. C'est ma question sur qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire face au changement climatique au Moyen-Orient, surtout dans la région autonome de Kurdistan et Irak, en tant qu'une région productrice de pétrole et de gaz. Comment on peut changer et comment on peut faire au changement face au climat, surtout dans la région. Plus particulièrement, c'est une ville qui est très très connue comme Slemani, capitale du Kurdistan d'Irak. Il y a énormément, il y a gaz là-bas. Comment on peut changer face au climat sur ça? Je vous remercie.
It's exactly the same question in French and in English, so that saves us a bit of time. Who would like to respond on this question? Teresa, please. We have to wrap up, so let's be...
Easier to be said than to be made, but important to be made, because otherwise it's a kind of damn conclusion on your own country and society. I think that it is important to diversify the way you create wealth and prosperity, and to do it in a very quick manner. Not because we are thinking on what could be the penalty that someone else is going to impose of us, but because it is a vulnerability. You cannot rely on something that sooner or later is going to be out of the market for several reasons. So I think that it is very important creating the opportunities to have other ways to achieve prosperity and wealth in the society. And I think that, again, here there is a kind of social trap, because at the end, if this is something that requires different skilling for youth, different prices for energy, it's difficult to be organized in such a way that does not create a higher divide in social terms. So I think that it requires a quite committed execution of the public policies to facilitate this transformation. And I think that we can see the difficulties of countries that are producers and quite wealthy, and they try to get as much time as possible to make this conversion happen. And it is always, the inertia also plays a role here. If it is working, how we are going to make a change on this. But it is much more difficult in countries where this wealth is not so high. So in fact, you have something that it is very well sold. You don't have so many opportunities to build a different type of development and wealth in your country. And there is not such an easy way to convince others to make this happen. But I guess that the best way to do this is to build partners. Now we will have a similar conversation with other type of raw materials that could be required in the new energy and digital industrial value chains. And I think that we need to think to make things differently. We need to build co-development, co-partnership, and to ensure that the add value, we are very efficient in the use of these materials, but that the add value is being reinvested to create other type of opportunities and not higher dependencies on new sources of richness. I don't know how to say it.
Thank you very much. I have to close this workshop. I'm going to tell you, as a Vice President of S&D Group, you can count on us that we will start working on a European framework on adaptation, showing solidarity between member states and prioritizing vulnerable citizens and regions. You can count on us for that. Let me thank our esteemed panel, Nicola Schmidt, Teresa Ribera, and Maros Sefcovic. And I would say, have a good lunch.